What is up, enthusiasts? It is Cedar Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. So as you can see, the setup is a little different. I have a brand new microphone, a brand new webcam, and I'm going to start a little bit of a brand new format as I go on. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the new mic, what you think about the new webcam, and, well, let's get right into the video. About a month ago, I came out with a very popular YouTube video that would garner lots and lots of viewers, and even a shout out from one of my favorite coaster YouTubers, Theme Park Crazy. This would be a video about 10 coaster models that never came into fruition. And so, why not I make a sequel to this video? Well, that is what I'm doing today. I decided to spend weeks going into the backbones of coaster forums and coaster archives from the 2000s, 90s, 80s, etc. If you haven't checked out the first video yet, I definitely recommend you check that out first. I have looked at other YouTubers and seen if they have talked about these models, and I decided to find some original ones that I could talk about. So without further ado, this is Cedar Flags, and here are 10 more forgotten coaster concepts never built. First, we are going to start out with Vekoma rides. Vekoma is known for a bunch of interesting things, and one of them is the Vekoma Tilt Coaster. Forming in the early 2000s with a ride called Gravity Max in Taiwan, this was the one and only tilt coaster ever built. Its tilting track was very intriguing, and a lot of people, especially the general public, were attached. But, did you know that in the early 2000s, Vekoma still wanted to capitalize on this, despite no new buyers? Introducing the Vekoma Seesaw. In IAAPA of 2004, Vekoma had a little poster on their booth that demonstrated this ride model. Now this would definitely be different from the traditional tilt coaster, as it seems more of a mix of a Vekoma boomerang and a Vekoma tilt coaster. It starts off with a lift into a tilt track that tilts you down into a spaghetti bowl section. But get this, after that, you go into another tilt track. This ride model would have two separate tilt tracks and have a shuttle style layout. This one really intrigued me, and I'm kinda sad not to see this come into fruition, but oh well, we got modern tilt coasters on the way soon, at least hopefully. In the early 2000s, the Gravity Group was formed out of engineers of the formerly known CCI, or Custom Coasters International. In deciding what they wanted to do for the newly found company, they made a bunch of new concepts, but most of them were just scrapped in early phases. But there were some main concepts that made it past the drawing board and onto the IAAPA trade show. Of course, you have the traditional wooden coaster. We saw the first with Hades at Mount Olympus, now known as Hades 360, and the rest is history. But did you know that the Gravity Group at the very beginning were also trying to step their feet into a Minetrain? They came out with a patent for a Minetrain, a modern wooden Minetrain, and even showed them off at some IAAPA booths in the early years of the Gravity Group. It looked like a pretty compact layout, looked like a traditional Minetrain but with very abrupt transitions. This honestly reminds me a lot of something like Lost Coaster at Indiana Beach, but instead without theming. This ride honestly looks like it would have been pretty cool, but no buyers were made. In the last video, we talked about the Maurer Rides spinning variant of the X car. If you don't know, in the early 2000s, Maurer Rides profited off of an amazing new innovative coaster car named the X car, but they made many different versions of it to appeal to many different genres of rides. And in the last video, we talked about the spinning version. But today, I'm going to talk about another version that was never built. If you've played Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, you know what this is. This is the Maurer drifting coaster. When the coaster hit lateral forces, the back of the coaster car would drift to the side, and this would be due to an axis on the front of the car that would let the back of the coaster sway independently. This coaster car was meant for more mild layouts that would be more of a novelty than anything special. It would have a cool variant and a fun feature, but other than that, this ride really didn't offer much. Back in the 1980s, aerodynamics was on top of the world. They were the biggest manufacturer at the time and quite possibly the biggest manufacturer of all time. But one of their projects was to bring back some old coaster models. In the last video, I talked about the Virginia Reel, but today, I'm going to talk about their Flying Turns remakes. Now, if you don't know what a Flying Turns is, it's basically the original bobsled coaster, having wood bobsled track and being at many famous parks all across the world. This model was announced slightly, but never made it past the testing stage. They didn't allow buyers or anything because this model had a lot of problems with it from the get-go. So they decided to scrap it early on and after an announcement. Luckily for Flying Turns fans, Knoebels attempted this in the 2000s and successfully built one by 2014. Now, we are going to a company that I bet you didn't expect to be on this list, Chance Morgan, otherwise known as Chance Rides or Morgan Rides or however you want to call it. In 2004 at the annual IAAPA conference, they had a model on display that was a pretty big deal at the time. This was known as the half-pipe coaster. This would provide a spinning roller coaster with some high-speed thrills. The trains were extremely similar to Gerstlauer's trains, but they were a lot more open, had a lot more restraints, I guess you could say, and looked like it was more fit for a thrilling coaster. It had over-the-shoulder restraints, and looks like it could deal with some pretty tight transitions. They said that this ride would have a very extreme layout, and provide some great transitions, and be flexible to do just about anything, even vertical track. And for a spinning coaster, at the time, that was pretty crazy. And honestly, out of these 10, I'm pretty sad that this ride didn't come out compared to the others. Think about how the spinning coaster industry would have been affected, and how the Mach Extreme Spinner or other similar models would have been different. Yes, we are going back to old reliable, Maurer Rides. I love the experimentation of this company, and we are talking about the X Train now. Now, like I said, they're known for their X car, but they wanted an attempt at something much bigger. This wouldn't be just a coaster car, this would be a full-sized train. Now, the attempt for this was to make bigger coasters with higher capacity, and it was designed for much bigger parks. Basically, the X car has only a 6-seater train, but the Maurer Rides X Train would have 4 seats across in 8 rows, which would be a grand total of 36 seats. Yes, this ride would have an insane amount of capacity, and it would actually have wing seats as well. Unfortunately, there were no buyers for this as well, probably because of the steady competition in these massive coasters like Intamin, B&M, RMC, etc. We are going back to the Gravity Group. We talked about their Minetrain earlier, but let's talk about something a little more interesting. In 2009 at their booth at IAAPA, they introduced a very interesting concept, especially for the times. Even now this would be interesting. They introduced a very compact shuttle wooden coaster. This thing would either be a mechanical nightmare or something that would be fun for the whole family. I think this would be a great idea, but we haven't heard anything from this ever since. I think this turned into their shuttle coaster concept, which we have seen one of those like I said, but we have not seen one of these with a launch. Up next, at the same conference actually, IAAPA in 2009, we go over to the Premier Rides booth. Now at the time, Premier Rides was going through a very severe makeover. They were introducing their Skyrocket model in the next year with Skyrocket at Kennywood, their very own prototype, and would be well on their way to introduce some other coasters like the Skyrocket 2s and rides like Full Throttle that would change their company forever. But another concept that they came out with around this time that never really caught on was their inverted coaster. This would provide literally everything that the other Premier Rides coasters had, but with an inverted layout as opposed to a standard sit-down layout. I think this would have been a very interesting ride, and looking at what the seats would look like, this just looked bizarre all around. It was only shown in 2009, and by 2010, all of their focus was on Skyrocket at Kennywood. So the only thing that we know about this is that it was a concept by them, but it had no buyers in the end, so we didn't see anything come out of it. Up next, we go to Intamin. Funny enough, this is the first Intamin I've mentioned in this whole video. Weird because there's so many failed concepts by Intamin, I can make a whole series on that. But right now, we are going to be talking about their launched water coasters. Yes, Intamin is known for their weird concepts, but in IAAPA of 2018, we saw one of their weirder concepts. Think of if you put a water coaster by Intamin and an Intamin Blitz together. you would get this incredibly complicated water coaster. It looks like it would have decent airtime moments, some low to the ground transitions, wouldn't be as snappy as a Blitz, but for a water coaster, this would be a very interesting model. It didn't have any buyers, it didn't have any of that, probably because it would have been one of the most unreliable coasters ever. I mean, think of how unreliable the Intamin water rides are already, and then think of how unreliable the Blitzes are. Yes, those combined would have an absolute nightmare when it comes to maintenance. I wanted to end off the list with a very bizarre one. This was basically, I don't even know what this is. It's basically the mix of a stand-up coaster and a zipline coaster. We've seen a few of these zipline coasters pop up with companies like Wygand going into the mix, but we never seen something as interesting as this. Think of that, but with stand-up trains. It would give you the feeling of surfing, it would be very open, though it would also be very safe at the same time. There's not much known about this ride layout. They showed off the trains and showed off the concept at IAAPA, and it was a big deal at the time. But other than that, nothing really came to be out of it. Anyways, what did you think about this video? What is your favorite out of the 10? And should I do a part 3? Let me know down in the comments below. This is Cedar Flags, and I will see you all later.